Naruto exclusive videos lemon come out on my Boosty. There is a 50% discount on subscription levels. You can watch and subscribe. Link in the description. Enjoy watching. Description: it's clear to everyone that Naruto can't live without adventures. But life after the war turned out in such a way that the famous blonde had to gather dust, gnawing on the granite of science, trampling her way to her dream. Boredom. True, it turned out that adventures also can't live without Naruto. Take this, sign for it. The quest called Fall on Tobirama's Head begins. And Tobirama also comes with Hashirama and Madara. Now it definitely won't be boring. Chapter 24. Naruto did not dare to go anywhere that day. From the temple, she was returning to her home in an upset state, carrying with her an incomprehensible feeling of guilt and a ton of remorse. Although Tobirama did not show his disappointment, it seemed that she had upset him by standing in the way of Madara. And this was gnawing at her from the inside. She walked by roundabout ways, stretching out the path as much as possible, slowly strolling along the dusty streets, contemplating the quarter awakening after the night. The clan was large and numerous, and every inhabitant of the quarter, who saw her, followed her with an interested look and whispers. A white crow among proud crows. At some point, she got fed up with this and, having filled her legs with chakra, she jumped onto the nearest roof, moving in a familiar way, which was not yet particularly popular here. Someone slid behind her. Naruto turned around. But she did not see her pursuer. Did she imagine it? No. There, a child was peeking out from behind the other side of the roof. A child who could run on rooftops, just like her. At his age, Naruto, with her mouth open, watched with envy as adult shinobi ran on rooftops. And suddenly she felt so sad when she remembered the reason why children had such well-developed shinobi skills. Uzumaki, not paying due attention to her tail, ran forward, accelerating. Since she was not going to fight hard with the papers today, she should at least meditate. She desperately needed to see Kurama. The pursuer did not run after her right away. He let her break away and feel that her tail had fallen behind, was far behind. It was a false feeling. The child deftly and stubbornly followed in her footsteps, trying to remain unnoticed. If she felt his presence, she could not characterize the pursuer. Was he a boy or a girl? How old was he? The Uchiha were generally above everything. Above their curiosity. They watched from afar, built theories, but did not bother her. She was no match for them. They even avoided her. Most of them looked downright contemptuous on her. Especially the females. Children imitated the manners of adults, but this child. If Naruto could use her ability to sense even emotions from a distance, then he would definitely be radiating curiosity. Otherwise, why was he following her? They decided to assign surveillance to her this morning? Nonsense! This would-be observer had already been exposed. So he was clearly driven by ordinary interest and curiosity. Uzumaki slid softly from the roof, landing in Madara's garden. She froze for a few moments, stretched, smiled, enjoying the warm sunny morning. The child hesitated, sitting on a wide-spreading oak tree. The leader's territory was clearly in doubt. Naruto decided to push him to more decisive action, and threw several kunai in his direction. Hey, what's wrong? Indignation with a hint of fear immediately followed. The branches actively rustled, shook. I missed. On purpose, Uzumaki smiled, accelerated, and ran up the tree trunk, on which the unfortunate observer was hiding, up. And who are you? Having reached her goal, she looked appraisingly at the boy. His black hakama were pinned to the bark with kunai. He was actively trying to pull out the iron stuck in the tree. He did not have enough strength. The fabric cracked pitifully. His pants were ruined. Who are you? He asked menacingly, his red eyes flashing. Probably wanted to scare her. Nice try, Naruto chuckled. But he attacked the wrong one. She was afraid only of Madara's Sharingan. With a heavy sigh, she approached the boy and pulled out the kunai before he tore his pants to shreds. He had a chance to escape. He only had to rip the fabric of his pants. Apparently, clothes were more important. Probably someone's mother would give him a dressing down today about torn clothes. Auntie, is it true that you are Madara-sama's future wife? He suddenly asked. So suddenly that Naruto almost fell over from what she heard. Is this some kind of new way to neutralize enemies? 1-1. And everything about this question shocked her. And his address to her. And the fact that she was assigned as Madara's spouse. Her eye even twitched from the impudence and tactlessness of the boy. What kind of an am I to you? I'm Naruto. Call me Naruto. Uzumaki was indignant. And definitely not Madara's wife. This thought scared her. Madara's wife. God forbid. Auntie, you're lying. The boy smiled impudently, seeing how her face twisted when he called her Aunt. Mom says she's definitely his wife. You live with him, the kid insisted. His red eyes faded, revealing a banal dark brown color. You'll call me his wife one more time. Naruto turned purple with unheard of impudence mixed with anger. If a child says this, then the whole block is whispering about it. And Madara knows about this? He should know, since the children know. Naruto sank. Auntie, are you feeling unwell? Blood pressure? The kid chirped, coming up to her and taking her hand. Otherwise, she might get dizzy and fall out of the tree, breaking her neck. Madara wouldn't praise him for that. And he was a ninja, ready to help a lady in trouble at any moment. Taking a fan from the bosom of his Haori, he began to fan the flushed and confused Naruto, who looked like a fish washed up on the shore. She opened her mouth, but could not say anything. And it seemed she was suffocating. You can't be nervous. Mom says that women in a position shouldn't be nervous. I don't know what a position is, but if my mother says so, then I believe her, the boy trilled like a nightingale, spinning around the target of his surveillance. Position? Naruto turned pale. So this is what kind of rumors are going around about her. Naruto shook. And what is a flirt? Is that why Uncle Madara is so angry? Because you twist your tails around Tobirama-san? And where is your tail? The nightingale did not shut up. He was either telling the absolute truth, heard from his mother and her friends, or he was deliberately bringing Naruto to a heart attack. Or is a tail a figurative expression? A person can have tails. So, kid, you're kidding, right? Naruto hoped so. That he was not sincere in his desire to find out the truth. But he skillfully wields the information he has heard, driving it to the brink. In revenge for his pants. No way. Do I look like a fool, mocking the probable wife of our leader? I'm just curious as to who you are and what Madara saw in you. Mother says that you— Oh, run, kid, run, Uzumaki interrupted him, boiling like a kettle forgotten on a fire. Everything inside her was bubbling and seething. And steam was practically pouring out of her ears. If he didn't shut up now, she couldn't vouch for herself. The child's mother was a gossip, the likes of which the world had never seen, and the child loved to warm his ears. Well, Naruto would now tear off this child's ears, teaching him some sense, since his parent was good at gossiping and not at raising him. The boy, realizing that something was wrong, backed away, and then ran headlong from the enraged Naruto. She tried to persuade herself not to run after him, to be an adult, adequate girl, not to fall for provocations. Or not to get mad at stupid rumors heard by a child who was essentially ignorant. And she persuaded herself. Until she remembered that she still hadn't found out the impudent guy's name. Tobirama had a couple of missions to weed the beds. And she simply had to recommend a candidate for them. Better to let him drag weeds than eavesdrop on all sorts of nasty things about her and Madara. Hey kid, stop right there. What's your name? She called out to him. What if he was stupid enough to tell her his name? What if you complained to Madara-sama about me and my mother? I won't tell. He shouted at her and disappeared. Uzumaki cursed and immediately rushed off in pursuit of the impudent fellow. Naruto felt a sense of déjà vu as she let this little devil escape for the 5th time. Once upon a time, she had also run away from teachers and mediocre chunin after yet another prank. And she had been very proud of herself when they had failed to catch her. Only now the roles were distributed differently. She was the one catching up. And she didn't like that at all. The boy had turned out to be nimble, cunning, and resourceful. Naruto felt old, feeble, and very angry. Oh, if only she had her former strength and power, and a morning that wasn't so nasty, the boy wouldn't have time to run away, she would have shown him. People looked at them in bewilderment, and some with outright amusement. Stop, I'm telling you! Uzumaki swore that she had enough of children. She would minimize their participation in her life to a bare minimum. Or better yet, reduce it to zero. Now she understood Kakashi's desire not to get involved in training 3 brats. The boy stopped for a moment, turned around, stuck his tongue out at her and ran away again, bursting into laughter. Naruto breathed angrily and rushed after her. He still has no idea how stubborn she is, and that he will be healing up the garden beds in the next couple of years. Naruto will do everything in his power to ensure that this little rascal never leaves the vegetable gardens. And she almost caught up with him at the hospital. It was hard to maneuver there among the people swarming at the construction site. He slowed down. She did too. Small! Naruto wailed angrily, breathing down his neck. Leave me alone, woman! He snapped and darted between the legs of some man. Naruto did not have time to turn, or to break in time. So she ran into an obstacle, cursing loudly. The boy turned around at the noise and burst out laughing, clutching his stomach. He was bursting with laughter and joy. Naruto and the male obstacle fell, raising a column of dust. I'll kill him! Uzumaki growled, and then sneezed loudly. She was shaking with indignation. I don't understand, are you trying to kill me? Senju Tobirama lay on the ground, spitting out dust and her hair. His right arm was buzzing with pain. At this rate, the bone wouldn't heal properly by the wedding of Mito and Hashirama. You're gone, but that little bastard is. Naruto raised herself up on her hands, realizing with horror that she had knocked Tobirama down. The little devil was standing not far from them, in no hurry to run away. Sorry. She hurried to get up from him. This. I'll strangle him. Uzumaki, as luck would have it, was tangled in traditional clothes, mercilessly sliding over Tobirama. Her clumsiness made her cheeks turn pink. Then the provocative rumors made her blush from head to toe. The builders and passers-by were already looking at them with interest. She sensed that now the rumors would acquire brighter and more saturated colors after this incident. What a shameless flirt, being Madara's bride, sitting here in broad daylight on Tobirama. And no one would care that she simply ran into him, knocking him down. Having dealt with her limbs in traditional clothes, she jumped up as if scalded. Senju, freed from Naruto's weight, assumed a sitting position and followed Naruto's gaze. The reason for her anger was Kagami Uchiha. Well, who would have doubted it? Kagami, Senju drawled, shooting a menacing glance in the boy's direction. What have you done? All the fun just blew off the boy. Kagami. Naruto beamed with malicious joy, mentally attributing all the D-rank missions to him. I wanted to meet her, and he put on the look of a beaten dog, pressing on pity. Naruto choked with indignation. You little liar! She exclaimed accusingly, regaining her composure. He was following me. And then he asked such questions, the color crept onto her face again. It was embarrassing to talk about such things. Especially Tobirama, about how she wagged her tail at him when the Uchiha wasn't looking. He's a child. And you fell for his provocations? Senju picked up the scrolls and estimates he was carrying to the construction site to personally instruct the construction crew and help lay the sewer. Naruto pouted in offense. Tobirama made her feel stupid. And really, why did she fall for the provocations of a greenhorn? A grown woman. Ugh. A girl. A girl. You just didn't hear what he said, she muttered, shamefacedly looking away. Kagami, wait for me in my office, Senju snapped. Kagami frowned, all the fun gone, and hunched over, he went where he was ordered. Sorry, Naruto breathed out, approaching him and shaking the dust off his dark clothes. Senju recoiled from her manipulations as if she were a leper. And then he turned his back on her altogether. Offended. Very much, as it turned out. And not this unfortunate misunderstanding. Come on! He threw over his shoulder. Naruto's spirits perked up. Not all was lost. You'll be painting the walls. No refusals, huh? She tried her luck. Tobirama nodded in agreement. It wasn't her day. Not hers. Chapter 25. Oh, I didn't expect that from you, brother. Toka shot an unfriendly glance in Tobirama's direction. Senju looked at his cousin with confusion, who, instead of greeting him from the doorway, accused him of something incomprehensible. Or is she trying to chase two hares? She scratched her chin thoughtfully. Who is she? What am I guilty of? Tobirama continued to be confused. It's like you fell from the moon, Toka snorted, sitting down at the set table. I decided to find out more about your blonde, but it turns out she's not your blonde. Toka used her spy skills for several days, following that blonde. She didn't find out the story of her life before she arrived in the village, but she learned very interesting details about her stay here. Toka, tell me straight. Tobirama was losing his temper. He didn't like such edgy and irritating evasions. He only realized that Toka had conducted an independent investigation into Naruto, and the results hadn't pleased her. It's worth noting that she had piqued his interest, and he skillfully passed off his impatience as indignation. You're what's her name, Naruto, Madara's wife, Toka said, as if cutting him off. Tobirama Senju choked. On air. A piece of fish, clamped between chopsticks, quietly plopped down on the table. Or a bride. I don't get it. The entire Uchiha clan is whispering. They say she's also pregnant, which is why she doesn't go on missions, even though she's a kunoichi. She came from nowhere, settled in Madara's corner, often hangs around during his training, although there have never been any curious people there. She went to the temple with him. And it's only for the Uchiha. Here, Toka, having recounted the data she had worked so hard to derive, set about eating with a sense of accomplishment. And his outburst of anger was motivated by jealousy. You know how sick the red-eyed are. And jealousy towards you. With each word he spoke, his appetite receded. The feelings were intertwined in such a tight knot that his insides were cramping. It seemed as if he had swallowed a stone. A good big boulder, with sharp edges scratching him from the inside. An unexpected reaction to Toka's news. So I don't understand, is it she who is wagging her tail at you, or are you pulling her towards yourself? Toka seemed not to notice his gloomy mood. And his cold, sharp gaze, hinting to shut up no worse than words. Why did you decide that she is Madara's wife? He spat out the last two words with disgust. Well, she couldn't have managed to jump out and marry Madara? Or could she? Had he blinked? Madara could be angry because that was when Naruto was giving Senju a massage. A flash of jealousy. And Naruto just didn't want to provoke Madara once again. That's why the Uchiha didn't touch Naruto and allowed him to enter the temple with impunity. No, these conclusions were nonsense. She couldn't have secretly become an Uchiha. But he wasn't 100% sure about that. This thought resonated in him with unreasonable irritation. That's what the Uchiha say. Toka shrugged, chewing rice and fish with pleasure. Tobirama chuckled skeptically. This is nonsense. They're just gossiping. No one knows the real reason why Uzumaki Naruto lives there. And that's good. Senju looked at his favorite sashimi with regret. He couldn't swallow another bite. Toka had ruined his appetite with her stupid gossip. She was just provoking him by voicing these absurd rumors to him. But what goals does she have in bringing this up? Does she want to irritate him? And it doesn't bother you that she's staring at a half-naked Madara? She said into her bowl of rice, looking askance at her younger brother, watching his reaction. What? Tobirama tore his regretful gaze away from his favorite fish. The unreasonable anger in his soul flared up even more. He involuntarily clenched his left hand into a fist. That's right. It's a fact, not a rumor. Madara is well built, there's something to see there, Toka drawled dreamily. Despite the fact that Madara was not popular with the Senju, she was sure that if she had the opportunity to see, and maybe even touch his abs, she would certainly take advantage of it. I'm telling you as a girl. I don't understand what you're getting at. Tobirama was seething, imagining the admiration with which Uzumaki was looking at the training Madara. A bubble of pent-up anger burst in his chest. Tobirama, you're kind of a genius, but sometimes you really like this. Toka rolled her eyes, grinning. She wasn't in a hurry to explain. Let him figure it out himself. She was watching not only Naruto, but Tobirama as well. And as a scout and spy, she had a keen eye. She sometimes saw much more than ordinary shinobi. You'd better tell me how you allowed Hashirama to marry the heiress of the Uzumaki clan? It's love, Toka, love. Hashirama sang as he burst into the house. I'm glad to see you, Toka. And the elder Senju rushed to hug his sister. The gloomy Tobirama, realizing that he didn't want to be in the company of his family, decided to go for a walk. He felt sick to his stomach. He didn't know what gods had brought him to the training grounds. But he instantly regretted that he had found himself there at the very moment when Madara was training there, and Naruto was sitting next to him, mouth open and eyes ablaze. The Uchiha, as luck would have it, was half naked. The picture from his imagination, born from Toki's words, was as real as could be. Tobirama clenched his jaws from tension. The gods were more prudent and didn't engage in such stupidity. It was he who had brought himself here, sensing Naruto and Madara's chakra. He was like a moth flying to a destructive light. It would hurt, but it had to, because it was meant for him by nature. Shall we train? Senju said, unexpectedly even for himself, approaching them. They had removed his cast in the morning. Now he was ready for greater training loads. Madara froze, allowing bewilderment to flash across his face. Naruto turned around in his direction, dumbfounded, blinking her eyes in surprise. Don't even ask. He simply responded to their bewilderment. He needed to let off some steam. A hurricane had settled inside him. Agree, when will you have a chance to beat up Tobirama with impunity? Naruto, seeing Madara's skeptical attitude and his doubtful gaze directed at Senju's right hand, decided to make her contribution. Well, go ahead, the Uchiha said, already looking at his friend's younger brother with more interest. As if he was already figuring out where to hit and how hard. It should be amazing. Uzumaki fidgeted in her seat impatiently. Her eyes lit up even brighter with anticipation mixed with admiration. It will be humiliating, Madara said contemptuously, stepping aside on the training ground. Senju remained silent, automatically pulling off his gray-blue Hiyori, remaining in gray hakama. Throwing his clothes next to Uzumaki, he walked with a firm gait to the training ground, stretching his muscles along the way. Now that will be a sight, Naruto exclaimed enthusiastically, lingering her gaze on his exposed chest, muttering something approvingly under her breath. This chilled Tobirama. Inopportunely, he remembered how her hands were kneading his stiff back. Thoughts quickly scattered in a hot shiver along his spine. What a lot to think about. But then all his thoughts were knocked out by Madara's swift attack. And for the first time, Tobirama was grateful to the Uchiha for his heartlessness. There would be no time to think about all sorts of stupidities in a duel against a sworn enemy. Naruto belatedly remembered that Tobirama and Madara sincerely hated each other. The revelation came to her at the moment when their jutsu ceased to be somewhat harmless. They showed such a level of skill that Naruto managed to envy them 3 times, get scared twice, and dodge the rollback of their techniques that collided head-on once. Grabbing Tobirama's Hiyori in her arms, she ran to the side on wobbly legs. Their duel resembled a cruel and merciless slaughter during a war. It was breathtaking and heart-pounding at the same time. So the spectacle was truly amazing. She had not seen such deadly grace and unbending power for a long time. Uzumaki was almost biting her nails with excitement, watching their fight. When would they finish? Horror and panic began to choke her from the inside. Madara was stronger. His power prevailed over Tobirama's. But the younger Senju was no slouch either. Clutching the crumpled Hiyori to her chest, she watched with bated breath as the gray and black dots dissolved in the battle. In particularly dangerous moments, she screamed, burying her face in the crumpled fabric, just to avoid seeing this disgrace, which she herself had partly provoked. It was beyond her strength. All she could do was stand aside, watching. If she tried to separate them, they would sweep her away without blinking an eye. And she foolishly hoped that they would be smart enough not to turn a training fight into a duel between two sworn enemies. Fortunately, in this battle, reason won. At some point, everything went quiet. Madara said something to Tobirama, gave a traditional bow, turned around and walked away. Naruto blinked in bewilderment, watching Madara's shaggy figure retreat. Senju stayed where he stood. Madara may not have finished him off physically, but he outplayed him mentally and destroyed him. The crushing blow came from where Tobirama least expected it. Uchiha, with all his cold-bloodedness, ruthlessly tore up the patterns. He expected the worst. A genjutsu that was deadly to the psyche, techniques that swept everything away, bone-breaking taijutsu strikes. But it all happened, but not that seriously. Not with all his might. Sparingly. It was stupid to voluntarily offer the worst of enemies a training sparring match. He realized that at the moment of the fight. Madara was a great chance to let off steam, to throw unnecessary thoughts out of his head, as well as a great chance to end up in a hospital bed or a cemetery. Tobirama was sure that Uchiha was asleep and seeing the younger Senju dying. Could Tobirama be wrong? Reality showed that he could. Madara was above the hatred that Senju Tobirama had heaped on him. Adhering to the principle of trust but verify, Senju Tobirama looked at the back of the retreating Uchiha and stopped the flow of chakra a couple of times, dispelling the illusion. The genjutsu was only in his imagination. For no matter how many times he restarted the flow of chakra, everything was the same. A warm summer night, a waning moon, a myriad of stars in the sky, the singing of crickets and cicadas to the music of the rustling of the wind in the leaves, and the retreating silhouette of Uchiha Madara. He barely scratched you, Naruto said in amazement, slowly walking around the frozen Tobirama. She carefully examined his body for injuries, lingering for agonizingly long seconds near his chest and back. In the light of the miraculously surviving paper lanterns, giving off a dim light, she looked for the consequences of the battle. 1, 2, she touched the bruises and abrasions weightlessly, counting them out loud. Tobirama tensed up. Each weightless touch of her fingertips to his sweat-dampened skin stung like an electric shock. 8, 9, she continued to flutter around him, looking for more impressive injuries. Well, they couldn't help but seriously injure each other. Such a duel, such jutsu, and they got off with bruises? Okay, the techniques, but what about Madara's hatred? Such a chance, and he didn't take advantage of it. Uzumaki was amazed, mentally noting that not all was lost with Madara. His world was once again threateningly shaking. In the rhythm of his heartbeat accelerating again. Was she mocking him? Really? To touch him so shamelessly. An impudent and daring girl. But he couldn't be angry at her outrageous behavior. At least not like before. And doesn't want to. And also. Yes, like this. Look, Naruto, look! You can touch him, feel the relief of his pumped-up muscles. With your own eyes, notice that he is no worse than the Uchiha. Touching is better than looking, after all. He notes distantly, remembering Toki's remark that Naruto often goes to stare at Madara. Half-naked Madara. Here's a scratch. Naruto carefully dabs a thin stream of blood on his throat with the sleeve of his kimono, ignoring the way his Adam's apple twitches nervously from her simple manipulation. Senju's breathing is ragged, because her gentle touch sends a powerful charge of electricity through his body. Does she also use Raiden? Tobirama frowns when he realizes that she doesn't. There is no smell of electricity. Naruto only has control over the wind, not lightning. This is how he reacts. What is happening now is the result of an unspoiled mood and unfounded anger. And when he attacked Madara with all his ferocity, he was not driven by hatred for Madara in the sense he was used to. He was driven by primitive jealousy. Only because of this poisonous feeling he put on a show here, like some peacock, fluffing up his tail in front of a female he liked. Look how handsome I am, bright and well-groomed, better than this shaggy grizzly. And he was angry at Toki's provocations, because they hit the bull's eye. Tobirama Senju was jealous. Look at him, he didn't even spoil your face. Something tells me that this is a kind of wedding gift for Hashirama, she chirps cheerfully, examining his face, finishing with his neck. Oh no, it did hurt. Rising on tiptoe, she brushes his bangs off his forehead. Senju couldn't stand it anymore. With one deft movement, he intercepted her hand and tried to give her a piercing look and gather his courage to push her away. She got too close to him. Naruto looked up at him and blinked in confusion. Like it was good after all, what's wrong? Senju froze and forgot himself. Her gaze and face were full of admiration and awe. Clenching his jaw so hard that his cheekbones cramped, he tried to persuade himself to become rude, repulsive, disgusting, so that she wouldn't interfere once again. No, I understand, you're all so manly and brutal, and it will go away on its own, but let me at least treat this wound. She interpreted his message differently, looking sternly at him from below. It looks like it could use a stitch, she chattered, not noticing that Tobirama's world had converged on her. No! No! And no! It wasn't jealousy. It was just that a sense of ownership had suddenly flared up in him. He cowardly didn't want to share Naruto's attention with anyone, especially one so full of admiration and her care. Yes, Naruto turned out to be very caring. So much so that she was ready to give her life for another. Give me the clothes. He squeezed out of himself with difficulty, letting go of her hand and taking a step back. He really didn't like what happened to him when she was around. Man! Uzumaki rolled her eyes in pain, but obediently handed him his haori, which she had slung over her elbow and was holding close to herself. In her left hand she had long been holding an ointment for bruises and abrasions. Apparently she had taken it out of the field first aid kit. And when did she manage to do it? What? You have to go to Hashirama's wedding tomorrow. No need to scare your brother with your bruises. She shrugged, corking the jar and hiding it back in her belt pouch and starting to rummage around there again. But the fight was awesome. She beamed, looking at his gloomy face, and handed him another bottle. Antiseptic powder made from anti-inflammatory herbs, forcibly putting the medicine in his hand, thus forcing him to take it. Uzumaki smiled casually, said a short goodbye, and walked with a flying gait in the same direction where Madara had gone a few minutes earlier. Lucky, Tobirama thought, because he left the training ground with a heavy heart, barely dragging his feet, oppressed by the storm Naruto left behind. Chapter 26. Naruto wasn't going to go to the wedding. No matter how interesting it was, she had a feeling that she wasn't welcome there. She would be a stranger and unwanted. And meeting Uzumaki once again, Ashina scared her just a little. She'd better try to get to Kurama. It was very sad that for reasons unknown to her, access to the demon was closed. She planned to devote the whole day to meditation. But when in the morning the servants brought a scroll on a tray along with breakfast, Naruto was surprised. And she felt in her gut that her plans were not destined to come true. Having turned it over in her hands, she hurried to open the unexpected find. The sealing scroll. The ornate contours of the Fuin gazed at her with silent anticipation from the yellowish chakra-conducting parchment. Naruto hurried to pour in the chakra, throwing aside all doubts and precautions. After all, no matter what was hidden there, she could handle it, couldn't she? Well, it certainly couldn't get any worse than it was now, her inner voice sarcastically noted with Kurama's intonations. Inside was a box tied with a red silk ribbon and a letter. And these things were in no hurry to attack her or harm her in any way. She looked at all this stuff for a minute, deciding what to open first. The letter or the box? The contents of the box, quite heavy and voluminous, won this unequal battle. Driven by curiosity, Uzumaki quickly untied the ribbon and removed the lid. Inside was nothing more or less than a piece of silk fabric. The fabric looked like a work of art. Putting her palms on it, she felt the pleasant and gentle coolness of the silk. Why do I need fabric? Naruto frowned slightly, not quite understanding the meaning of the gift. Maybe the letter would clarify the purpose? Uzumaki opened the envelope with a kunai pulled out from under her pillow. Since she was given the weapon, she had not parted with it. Naruto whistled, looking at the beautifully written calligraphic hieroglyphs. The letter was from Mito. The bride invited her to a closed wedding ceremony, which was to take place in the Senju clan temple. And in gratitude for her help in the capture of the criminal who so shamelessly attacked the princess of the Uzumaki clan, she asked to accept this beautifully embroidered kimono. Oh. So this is a kimono? Naruto glanced sideways at the box. Kimono. Yes, everyone here wore kimonos. She rarely met anyone who dressed differently. The fashion for things from her time had not yet come into its own. Naruto, for lack of an alternative, wore wide black or blue hakama and a regular haori, which looked more like a robe. And all the things had the Uchiha clan logo. Uzumaki reached into the box and pulled out a formal outfit. It was heavy, bulky, and incredibly luxurious. And terribly incomprehensible. Naruto was awed when she saw the wide, long sleeves that fell almost to the floor. Apparently, the outfit was uncomfortable. In addition to the main robe, or rather, she couldn't call it anything else, there were a couple of simpler things. A wide obi belt, some kind of board, small, narrow pieces of fabric, a short-sleeved tunic that looked more like a nightgown, and panties? Her eyes widened in panic. If these were all parts of the same outfit, then in what order should she put it all on? And why did she skip girls' classes and etiquette? Well, to be honest, she skipped them because they were boring and uninteresting. Making flower arrangements, housekeeping, tea ceremonies. A waste of time. You can't go against an enemy with an ikebana at the ready. It's a laughing matter. Shinobi are warriors, killers, why do they need these skills? But now, looking helplessly at the kimono, she wouldn't refuse to get them. Madara. She whispered under her breath and abruptly jumped up from her seat, almost tripping over the low table. The clay dishes clattered indignantly in response. Madara, I need help! She screamed at the top of her lungs, running out of the house in search of the owner of this territory. Tobirama was glad to be in the clan temple. This place had a calming effect on him. Something that he vitally needed right now. Even the worries about the upcoming wedding could not help him not to chew over his emotional background in relation to some blondes. His heart finally calmed down, having reached its former balance, fanned by the reverent coolness of the sacred place. The storm in his soul died down. His head cleared up. There was no need to act rashly. He could confuse banal friendly sympathy with another interest. He was simply irritated by the fact that Naruto was under Madara's wing. And the head of the Uchiha clan caused open discontent in him, sometimes going beyond the bounds of reason, as soon as his own paranoia raised its head. Well, no, what if those two were plotting while Hashirama and he were in blissful ignorance? But now he suppressed the hostility towards Madara. Otherwise, he would simply ruin his mood on this bright and festive day. They simply ignored each other's existence, standing shoulder to shoulder, doing Hashirama a favor. Now Senju was habitually indignant, because Madara was standing not far from him, desecrating their shrine with his presence as a whole. The Uchiha had always worshipped Amaterasu, the goddess of the sun, while the Senju revered Izanami, the goddess of creation and death. He simply had to come to terms with what was happening. Therefore, he redirected all his attention to the couple in front of the altar. Still, he was glad that Hashirama had found his love. Happiness emanated from her brother, which poured out in uncontrollable flashes of chakra. And Mito was calmer. She subtly and skillfully controlled her chakra, not allowing herself to do something like that. The girl seemed modest, reserved and docile, in contrast to the well-known fact that Uzumaki are still scarlet-haired demons, and their temperament leaves much to be desired. He had someone to compare with, but she is a half-breed, and only a Shinigami knows what is mixed in her. The ceremony was approaching the middle. There were few guests, as expected only a narrow circle of people. From the Uzumaki only Ashina and Akane. Madara as Hashirama's best friend and comrade. Tobirama and Toka as close relatives of the groom. To his joy, Uzumaki Naruto should not be here. She is a nobody to them. And he hoped that luck would continue to accompany him. As during the celebration, which after the ceremony would flow into a full-fledged festivities, where the entire village would surely gather. Hashirama was the one who united them all and gave hope for a more peaceful and calm future. Many will come to express their gratitude and congratulate the newlyweds. In such a crowd, it is unlikely to meet one person, unless you specifically look for him. Hashirama, with a voice trembling with emotion, took an oath of love before the gods, when suddenly a familiar energy blew into the back of his head, mercilessly knocking him out of the rut he had just entered. Alien chakra, seething with life and colors, tickled his nerves, making his insides tense. He clenched his fists, gritting his teeth. Naruto stood behind him, causing him to feel almost angry. And not only with her existence, but also with the fact that she was shamelessly late for the ceremony and had the audacity to burst in the middle of the action. Total disrespect for tradition. And for Hashirama. "I'm late, I confess," Uzumaki whispered guiltily, so loudly that she was barely audible. But he heard. She was a shinobi, after all. Madara grinned next to him, hiding his reaction to the guest's appearance behind his spiky black mane of hair. After all, what could anger the pedantic Tobirama could amuse Madara. Although the Uchiha was serious, correct, undoubtedly conservative and very gloomy, he still had a sense of humor. And he certainly took advantage of the moment when a panicking Naruto ran to him with a box in her hands and a request for help in dressing in a traditional outfit, dumping on him the causes and consequences for which she needed this very help. Madara, of course, was taken aback by such a request, looked at Naruto as if he were a savage who had come out of the forest, but he helped fulfill the request, inviting a servant to help her. Old, slow, and very grumpy, with a very conservative outlook on life. That's why Naruto was incredibly late. Makoto had clearly been scolding Naruto for her lack of education for more than an hour. After all, a decent girl should at least know what a kimono is made of. It was surprising that the fair-haired Uzumaki had enough brains to appear in the middle of the ceremony quietly and unnoticed. As if she had been standing there all this time, hiding behind the powerful and broad backs of Tobirama and Madara. Hashirama and Mito were so carried away by themselves and the wedding ceremonies that they did not notice anything around them. Toka glanced sideways at the unexpected guest, then at Tobirama and again switched all her attention to the head of the clan and his almost wife. The ceremony was approaching its climax. The wave of irritation at Naruto's actions passed, leaving Tobirama with only an unpleasant aftertaste. And her presence could be looked at from a different angle. He decided to conduct a series of studies on his reactions. This could make his life much easier. He now had the opportunity to try to sort out his inner mess as soon as possible with her direct participation. Tobirama simply had not expected to meet the enemy face to face so soon. He was not prepared, so he could not decide whether this was a pleasant surprise or an omen. Everything depended on the results. How complicated everything had become! Senju loved puzzles, but not those that concerned his own subconscious. He was not tempted to delve into his feelings. And yet, he took advantage of the opportunity, immediately noticing that his heartbeat had accelerated. Insignificantly. He also needed to look at the reflective surface to check the condition of the pupils. Naruto stood behind, carefully craning her neck to see what was happening in front of the altar. Nothing was visible because of Tobirama and Madara. And the table with fruits and sake did not allow her to go behind Toki. The fabric rustled annoyingly. Naruto puffed infuriatingly. And all this in Tobirama's ear. Taking a deep breath and exhaling heavily, he took a small step to the side, pressing his right shoulder to his cousin. "Thank you." Uzumaki breathed out gratitude into his left shoulder. The pulse was gaining momentum, accelerating. Naruto noticeably touched his shoulder with hers, moving closer to him. But now she saw the ceremony, and his heart was not in the right place. The alarm bells that his body was sending him hinted at things that were not very good for him. The ceremony was coming to an end. Ashina was already congratulating the newlyweds, hugging his granddaughter and son-in-law. Tobirama was going to congratulate them next. And without waiting for the head of the Uzumaki clan to finish his ceremonial speech, He moved towards his brother, away from Naruto. I entrust him into your caring hands. Tobirama smiled awkwardly. Mito was a woman he barely knew, with whom he had never really interacted. He was wary of her. Hashirama was his only sibling, and Tobirama was rightfully worried about him, despite all the love with which Mito looked back at her husband. All the words from his prepared speech suddenly seemed insincere, cold. Thank you for your trust. Mito smiled radiantly and bowed her head in gratitude. I hope your hand is heavy, because there's a lot of nonsense in his head. Sometimes you need to knock it out. Senji Jr. felt out of place in front of his daughter-in-law. And now they were family. He needed to get used to it. Heavy. She grinned cheerfully and impulsively, with all her friendliness, hugged him, throwing aside all formalities. Tobirama was taken aback. Doubly so. The Uzumaki had clearly decided to finish him off. As soon as Mito pressed herself against him, he felt as if he had spied on someone else's secret. Doubly awkward. A very, very personal secret. Shame mixed with shock. Don't drink too much sake, he blurted out involuntarily. Oh! Mito recoiled in fear. You're a good censor, she mumbled, blushing and looking down. Don't tell anyone, okay? Or else. Well. You. In short, don't tell, Tobane. She began to whine nervously, turning red. The color of the blush on her face was the same as the color of her hair. She nervously tugged at the sleeve of her white kimono. Tobirama didn't have time to ask himself, when did they manage to do it? They were always under surveillance, and they had been apart for a month, but apparently. What's not to say? Hashirama, who was finally released by Ashina-sama, hugged Mito, pressing her to his side. Did he hurt you? Hashirama narrowed his eyes dangerously, seeing how hunted his wife was. Tobirama could blurt out something offensive. No, what are you saying? He just told me that you need to be watched like a hawk. Mito smiled, straightened up, but looked at Tobirama pleadingly. Don't listen to him, he likes to slander. Hashirama waved his hand, throwing a look full of offense at his brother. As if, a traitor. I didn't say anything like that. Tobirama crossed his arms over his chest. And I won't. This is your family business now, the younger Senju said, pulling himself together, making it clear to Hashirama that he hadn't said a word about his addiction to drinking and gambling, and to Mito that he wouldn't talk about her delicate situation. And on that note, he hurried off to the set tables, where the Uzumaki were already standing. Hashirama and Mito were immediately intercepted by the beaming Toka, who was expressing her congratulations much more boisterously and joyfully. Madara, what should I do? Approaching the tables, he heard Naruto's plaintive whisper addressed to Madara. This is my first wedding. I can't imagine what or how. Her panicked gaze darted from the newlyweds to the Uzumaki and back. The Uchiha, who usually ignored any requests for help, briefly told. First a request for how to put on a kimono, now this. Uzumaki, from what thicket did you crawl out? Madara pursed his lips in displeasure, looking at his interlocutor with his characteristic contempt mixed with arrogance. Tobirama again experienced echoes of yesterday's feeling. His organs were fettered by an unpleasant cold and prickly weight. Only this time it was heavier and blacker. And it was pulling him to the bottom. The alarm bells were turning into a full-fledged alarm. Tobirama grabbed the bowl with a jerky sharpness and immediately drained it to the bottom, in an attempt to drown out the cold and prickly discomfort that had settled inside him with the tart and burning alcohol. It did not help. He poured more. Behind his back, Toka was still spraying congratulations. Naruto no longer terrorized Madara with requests for help, but awkwardly scurried to the newlyweds, because it was her turn to congratulate. Turning around, he followed her figure with his gaze for a while, feeling the need to drink another portion of sake. Ashina-sama at some point approached him, starting a polite conversation, and became a blessing. Tobirama switched his attention to him. At least, he sincerely tried to do so. The suddenly started conversation with the head of the Uzumaki clan could not distract him to the proper extent. Everything was as if in a fog. He felt absent-minded and unsettled. Naruto, who asked Madara to help her with her kimono. Uchiha, who was surprisingly loyal to someone who had recently been his captive under surveillance, not inspiring confidence. Mito, who turned out to be pregnant and very cleverly concealed it. The culprit of all this disgrace in the person of his brother, and he unhappy and lost in this celebration of life. It was beyond his strength.